Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the North Shore Unitarian Church, where our mission is to empower people to live with greater depth, meaning, and purpose. There are many things I love about this place, but the one thing I was reminded this morning that I really love is the Sundays when we have the children share part of the service with us. It is so good to see your faces. And it is so good to enjoy the story as much as you do. In this community, we welcome people from all walks of life, no matter where they come from, how they earn their living, what their path to sacred is, or what their family makeup is, who they love. So once again, welcome.
And good morning again, everyone, on this foggy, sunny, wintry day. My name is Ariel, and my work here is all about helping you make meaningful connections in this community. And so I'd like to say an extra welcome to any newcomers or visitors that we have with us this morning. If you'd like to learn more about our community, I'd invite you to sign in with your contact information on the iPad that's in the foyer. And there are friendly volunteers wearing greeter buttons who would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about our congregation. And after the service, I'd like to invite everyone downstairs for tea and coffee and conversation. And today we also have a delicious soup lunch for sale as well. An intergenerational potluck and talent show coming up at the end of the month on January 28th. And you can, if you have an act that you'd like to contribute, you can sign up downstairs. And if you have any questions about that, you can talk with Lynn Sabrin, our Director of Family Ministries. Today at 12:15, right here in the sanctuary, we're having a second town hall meeting to talk about the proposed site for our new building. So this is aimed kind of primarily at people who were not able to attend the first meeting, but everyone is welcome. Once again, welcome all. It's good to be with you.
May the light of understanding illuminate our darkness. May the warmth of sharing bring us peace.
So a few years back, when Emily and I had first just moved to Rochester, New York, we were getting to know the area and settling in, and I was exploring the YMCAs, those are the rec centers in the area, and they had a really nice little network of YMCAs. A couple of them were brand new, and I was enjoying. I was excited, and we signed up for membership right away, and I was going almost 4 or 5 times a week to these great, beautiful new Ys. Within about 2 weeks, the excitement wore off. Amidst all of my little excuses, the excitement of going to the Y kind of slid slowly, actually not so slowly, into that bucket of shoulds and have-tos and gotta's. The bucket that I'm talking about. Do you have one of these? And I try and kind of cram that bucket under the sink and ignore it, but it grabs me every time. So I decided I needed to re-up my intention, and I got a personal trainer. And I was seeing this personal trainer, and that was it was really hard. I was exhausted after the first time. A couple of times seeing this person, I was sore for days and days. So I was talking then to my spiritual director, and I was talking to my spiritual director about, and she had wise words to say about working with my personal trainer, about maybe I should just kind of cut whatever weight he says to do in half. And remember that it's really not. I'm not doing this because of what he's telling me to do or because I have to, but because it really is in alignment with my deepest self, with what I want for myself, for my being, for living with depth, meaning, and purpose. This is what I want to do. And all of that was really good, but the whole time I was thinking, God, I am talking to my spiritual director about seeing my personal trainer. I'm paying one person to tell me how to work with another person I'm paying all to do something that I already know I need to do. This living with intention, this living with depth, meaning, and purpose, boy, it can get expensive. And I think that is why we come to church, to pull ourselves out of that bucket of have-tos and shoulds, to realign and reconnect with our deepest values, with what we want for ourselves and for the world. I wonder if any of you have seen a movie called Moana. Yes? I was hoping and imagining that was the answer. For the uninitiated, Moana is a Disney adaptation of a Hawaiian myth. And Moana is a pretty cool princess, isn't she? I mean, for Disney princesses, yeah, she's not a princess. Exactly, that's what makes her such a cool princess, right? There's some history there. But anyway, so Moana, she what in that beginning of the story, before she even meets Maui or goes anywhere, do you remember what does her dad tell her she cannot do? Yeah. She cannot go to the ocean and she cannot sail. Like, she can't go past the reef. And what does Moana do? She does it, yes. Is that what you're going to say? Yeah. So, she does it. She does exactly what her dad says she has to promise not to do. You said good for her. Was anybody troubled by this when you watched it? Was anybody out here troubled by this when you watched it? This Moana right, it's Henry's favorite movie, our 2-year-old son. And he doesn't get to watch much movies, but he's seen Moana, and he loves Moana. But a friend of mine, a colleague, was telling me that their 4-year-old, when they saw Moana, and they saw that moment when Moana goes off and she does exactly what her dad has made her promise not to do. This 4-year-old girl, she was very disturbed. Because you are not supposed to break promises you make to your father. Or anybody else, really, for that matter. And so the 4-year-old was aghast. And they had to talk about it for a while. It was hard to explain. Why might it be a good thing to break a promise? Why might it be a good thing to break a promise? To save the day, yeah. You might have to break a promise to save the day. It's happened, you know. To save your island, yeah. This is a hard one. I think it's a hard one actually for all of us here. It's not a hard one just for kids. It's a hard one for all of us. When is it okay, or when is it the right thing to break a promise? And I think that one of the answers is given in one of the songs that Moana's grandmother sings to her. And she sings about that voice inside, hearing that voice inside. When you hear that voice inside telling you what to do, that voice is who you are. Do you remember that song? Yeah. So I wonder about this, that voice inside and promises that we make and the promises that we break. So if you have any other good ideas of when it's okay to break a promise, come tell me sometime, okay? I'm trying to figure this out. Make a place of prayer, no fuss. Just lean into the white brilliance and say what you needed to say all along. Nothing too much. Words as simple as yours and as heard as the bird song above your head, or the river running gently beside you. Let your words join one to another the way stone nestles on stone, the way water just leaves and goes into the sea. The way your promise breathes and belongs with every other promise the world has ever made. The way your promise breathes and belongs with every other promise the world has ever made. Now leave them to go on. Let your words carry their own life without you. Let the promise go with the river. have faith, walk away. It's a poem by this poet I've mentioned, David White, who I'm fascinated with right now. I want to read you his author's note about it. He says, "This poem, To Make a Promise, sometimes lives under the title To Break a Promise." It's published both ways. As to my mind, both the making and breaking of promises involve exactly the same combination of absolute presence and radical letting go. All romantic and committed forms of love live and breathe not only with the ground of the past and present, but with a horizon of implicit promise, an invitation to a shared sense of becoming, he says. And I think other promises are like that too. So if you will, recall for a moment a time that you broke a promise. Maybe it was the last time you broke a promise, or the first time. A time that was a big deal for you, or maybe a time that it was a big deal for somebody else. And just notice if any feelings or experiences stir. What's it like to break a promise? Is there pain or sorrow, regret, liberation, chagrin, joy? What's it like to break a promise? One of the ways of looking at the complexity of human life, of change and growth. One of the ways that's been especially in vogue the last 100 years or so is a developmental model, right? To look at things as developmental models. The psychologist Piaget was founded in many ways these developmental models of psychology. Out of his work, we have developmental models for all sorts of aspects of human life. Developmental models that describe cognitive functioning, gross and fine motor functioning, developmental models of psychological challenges that we face from cradle to grave, developmental models of different kinds of skills and awareness. Many Unitarians in recent years have been studying developmental models of intercultural competency, anti-racism work. And there's developmental models of spirituality that people have created, the spiritual journey as a developmental model. And there's one developmental model I want to lift up today. It's Lawrence Kohlberg's Stages of Moral Development. This was 6 stages that Kohlberg developed from orienting in the early stages towards obedience and punishment and then self-interest, eventually orienting towards more abstract ideas like the social contract or universal ethical principles. I find developmental models really useful. They often help me to complexify my thinking, to approach behavior that I don't like with curiosity and compassion rather than judgment, and to gain insight into my own areas, my own needs for further growth and development. But as useful as they are, there are limitations to the models too, right? So particularly in Kohlberg's model, he developed it starting in 1958, and in the studies that he conducted to develop it, he only studied men from one dominant cultural background. You guess which one. And so since him, others have come up with alternative models, importantly Carol Gilligan's feminist critique, and then her model of moral reasoning rooted in the ethics of caring. And more recently, many psychologists have moved away from models based on any sort of moral reasoning, arguing that moral judgments are made much more without actually rational thought, more on kind of social intuition or sort of deeper metaphors and training. And I tend to buy into this way of thinking. But regardless, even the great debate about the accuracy of any of the particular models what I want to lift up is the usefulness in this way of thinking. One of the things I notice when I think about my own moral reasoning, my own moral development in this way, is that I'm not ever at a static developmental stage. One moment, I'm a relatively mature adult with complex thinking, even some training in working with challenging moral situations, and then a trigger occurs. Oh, I'm in a stressful situation, or someone treats me like that teacher I didn't like in grade 7, and I'm suddenly acting out of a very different developmental stage. Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, good. You notice that? Oh, and the sad truth is, it's often with those we are closest to, the ones we depend on the most, that we get stuck reverting to our shallowest development. Right? And in that shallow development, when it comes to promises, that early black and white moral thinking, it goes something like this: all promises should be kept. Those who break promises have done something bad and should feel bad about themselves. They should feel shame. A colleague shared with me this story. She said she used to like to say that she would never leave her husband. She said it sounded like a grand romantic promise to make. And then she says, my spiritual director pointed out, this is something that Unitarian ministers are into, spiritual directors, but anybody can go to them, they're great. She says, my spiritual director pointed out that of course it's not true. There are things that could happen between us that would make separating a healthy choice, and promising to stay no matter what was actually an unhealthy promise to make. Promising to stay no matter what was actually an unhealthy promise to make. This change in thinking is the shift to a more complex stage of moral development, the ability to weigh multiple important values in pursuing wholeness and health. And while I'm sure there are some wise folks out there who rarely or maybe never get hooked into early stage thinking, I know I certainly do. And one of the hardest times to get out of the blame trap of broken promises, actually, is those promises I've made only to myself. The ones that I may not have even brought into conscious awareness. Do you know the kind of promises that I'm talking about? They're hard to articulate. Some of them are the kind of promises that this poet, Susan Freibert, prods us to reconsider in a piece called What If You Put It Down? She says this: what if you put it all down? What if you didn't make it to the front of the line, finish the marathon, or beat the crowd? What if you didn't inspire vast ripples on the web, go viral with your gospel, or create new cyber trends? What if you didn't learn to speak another language, drive a car across the country, or blossom into a true blue yogi? What if you didn't use more time to just listen, be still and reflect, simply hold out your hand? What if you didn't permit yourself passion, take one more chance, or allow your soul to be seen? What if you didn't give heed to your heart, feed all those fears, or walk boldly through that door? You will develop in each season to ripen wholly into your prime, she says. You will develop in each season to ripen wholly into your prime. So what does it matter, the things you did not do in this blessed allotment of time, when the tour de force is within every treasured moment? You cup your worthwhile life inside the love of your divine hands, to kiss full on the mouth all its cherished wonder. The tour de force is within every treasured moment. You cup your worthwhile life inside the love of your divine hands to kiss full on the mouth all its cherished wonder. And my experience tells me to do that, you might have to break some promises. As careful as I can be about making promises, and like I was saying last week, I try to be careful with my promise making. I know that there are countless promises that slip into my psyche, into my being, sometimes even more subtle than thought, that if I tried to live up to them all without breaking or at least renegotiating many, if not most of them, I'd be far too busy and distracted for any cupping with divine hands, let alone full mouth kisses and cherishing wonder. David Allen is a productivity guru, somebody I got a lot of wisdom from about a decade ago. And his system, his book is called Getting Things Done, which doesn't really, compel many of us to want to read it. But he does have a lot, he couples actually a spiritual wisdom with his kind of efficiency goals. So he offers the goal of mind like water, that's really the purpose of his system of getting things done, is to have this free mental space of mind like water. And he has a very elaborate but very clear system to achieve this state. And one key component has to do with renegotiating agreements that you've made with yourself. Because he says he notes how profoundly stressful on the psyche it is to break agreements. To live without stress, then you need to renegotiate your agreements instead of breaking them. But he says, here's the problem. It's impossible to renegotiate agreements with yourself that you can't remember you made. It's impossible to renegotiate agreements with yourself that you can't remember you made. The fact that you can't remember an agreement with yourself doesn't mean you're not holding yourself liable to it. Ask any psychologist, he says, how much of a sense of past and future that part of your psyche has, the part that tracks those agreements that we make. 0. That means that as soon as you tell yourself you should do something, there's a part of you that thinks you should be doing it all the time. And that means that as soon as you've given yourself 2 things to do and filed them only in your head, you've created instant and automatic stress and failure because you can't do both at the same time. So then he offers this example. He says, if you're like most people, you've probably got some storage area at home, maybe a garage, that you told yourself a while back, maybe even 6 years ago, maybe longer, you ought to clean and organize. If so, there's a part of you that likely thinks you should have been cleaning your garage 24 hours a day for the past 6 years. No wonder people are so tired. And have you heard that little voice inside your own mental committee every time you walk by your garage? Why are we walking by the garage? Aren't we supposed to be cleaning it? And because you can't stand that whining, nagging part of yourself, you never even go to the garage anymore if you can help it. So he says, if you want to shut that voice up, you have 3 options for dealing with your agreement with yourself. 1, lower your standards about the garage. Maybe you've done that already. So I have a crappy garage, who cares? 2, keep the agreement. Clean the garage. Or 3, at least put clean garage on what he calls a someday maybe list. And then when we review that list weekly, this is the part that's a little harder to stick with, and you see that item, you can tell yourself, not this week. The next time you walk by your garage, you won't hear a thing internally other than, Not this week. So I've sort of confessed this already, that while I found great wisdom in his work, I've not yet been able to stick to his system of extensive list making and keeping up with. But giving it another try is on my someday maybe list. So I'm not actually suggesting his lists as the answer to breaking or renegotiating the promises we make to ourselves. But if you're anything like me and most people that I know, you've probably got a significant supply of things you've told yourself you should do. Maybe are ways you should be. This pool of them lounging around your psyche, just waiting for an opportunity to remind you of your failure in not living up to your intention. And some of them get lodged so early, so deeply, that words may not even adequately express them. They're what some people would call core stories, core wounds, core defenses. They're promises we've made to ourselves that operate at an almost instinctual level, promises that served us once to keep us safe or get other needs met, but as adults can be limiting and sometimes even dangerous. I have to be nice. I have to put others first. I have to be the best. I have to win every time. I have to stay invisible, unnoticed. I can only show others what they really want to see. I have to do it all alone. I can't depend on anyone else. I can't do anything by myself. I have to depend entirely on others. Maybe you have one of these, or maybe yours have a different shape. But these stories, they're most limiting, whatever they are, when they're held in those early stages of development, when they're seen in black and white thinking. And while we often wrestle with our deepest stories for a long time, our relationship to them changes as we develop. Sometimes we're able to see them with just a little bit more distance. Sometimes they fade, so they're hardly visible at all. The esteemed meditation teacher Sharon Salzberg wrote an article recently discussing the idea of trying to let things go. She said there's no doubt that the idea of letting go, the advice to let it go, has become more popular in recent years, especially those whose kids enjoy Frozen. Will hear that line over and over. But especially, she says, in light of the popularization of meditation and mindfulness, it seems people are starting to see that there is a profound power in the act of surrender. In a layman's example, people are starting to realize that gripping tightly to stress does not make you happier. But there is a difference between surrendering and succumbing, between letting something go and hurling it away from us. Letting go is gentle, but it is not characterized by passivity. It involves intention, patience, and a willingness to change habits of mind. I think this is the letting go that allows us to break promises without wounding our psyches. This is not how most of us were taught to relate to breaking promises or to change of any sort. Salzberg says, conditioning tells us that if we would only berate ourselves enough, blame ourselves enough, and consider ourselves failures enough, we'd accomplish a lot more. In truth, those habits usually leave us exhausted and demoralized. if we were to look at how we accomplish the most and make the most progress in any endeavor, put the most sustained effort into seeking change, it's a very different environment that brings us closer to our aim. Something much more like letting go with intention and patience, a willingness to challenge habits of mind. Make a place of prayer. No fuss. Just lean into the white brilliance and say what you needed to say all along. Nothing too much. Words as simple and as yours and as heard as the bird song above your head, or the river running gently beside you. Let your words join one to another the way stone nestles on stone, the way water just leaves and goes to the sea. The way your promise breathes and belongs with every other promise the world has ever made. The way your promise breathes and belongs with every other promise the world has ever made. Now leave them to go on. Let your words carry their own life without you. Let the promise go with the river. Have faith. Walk away. May it be so. Amen.